Okay. I want to first express my sincere sympathies to the families of particularly those who've lost loved ones during the coronavirus pandemic, and particularly to the 7 families who have suffered loss today. Throughout the 9 weeks of the lockdown, the department has prioritised the learning needs of our pupils, as well as the physical and mental health and well-being of our young people in our care and our staff. Our teachers, school leaders, youth workers and other education partners are continuing to do an excellent job in supporting our children and young people and their families. Since Easter, there's been a rise in the number of children attending open schools, and on average 450 settings have been open daily, with around 2,000 staff supporting supervised learning for around 1,700 children. I've been acutely aware of the concerns of substitute teaching workforce who no longer have access to secure work. On Tuesday, the department launched the Income Support Scheme for teachers. The Executive will provide £4 million funding towards the scheme, and I've reprioritised my budget to meet the balance of £8 million. Turning to free school meals payments, the scheme introduced by my department to date, free school meal payments have been in the region of 10.7 million and have been made in respect of 101,500 children. Whilst the number of vulnerable children attending school here remains low at approximately 300 to 400 a day, it is increasing. Work to support our vulnerable children continues, with significant collaboration between the Education Authority, Health and Social Care Service and the PSNI. I appreciate that this crisis is impacting on the mental health and emotional well-being of our children and young people, and I will be considering in the days ahead how best we can support them when they return to school. Providing continuity of learning for our young people is a key focus of the education sector. Unlike other education systems, we have in place an educational technology system which is effectively supporting online learning. Through C2K, the Education Authority delivers a comprehensive range of tools of support teaching and learning. This will be very important in the coming months as we move to a more blended approach to learning with time spent in the classroom and time at home. I'm conscious that some school pupils are at more risk of falling behind than others. In response, I've announced a scheme to lend devices to our educationally disadvantaged and vulnerable learners moving into key transition years. This involves a 3-stage process to the allocation of digital devices to children. Stage 1, using existing school stock, which is already being lent out. Stage 2, using 3,000 new laptops, which have been procured by the Education Authority. And Stage 3, if needed, a further 4,000 to 8,000 additional devices will be bought. These could provide up to 24,000 devices to be lent out to pupils over the coming weeks according to need, with criteria already established to prioritise distribution. In relation to restarting the education system, we're looking to the future. While there's been a tremendous amount of work done in remote learning over the past 2 months, it's important that we focus now on recovery and a process of phased reopening of our schools. This must be led by medical and scientific evidence to ensure that it's done in a manner and at a timescale which is safe for our pupils, our staff and wider society. The pathway to recovery will follow the route outlined in the education section of the Executive Approach to Decision-Making document. I'm aware of the need to give as much certainty to people as possible, so let me set out the likely timeframe as regards schools. The Department has established a restart programme which, working alongside a wide range of stakeholders, will put in place the detailed arrangements which will enable a safe, phased reopening of schools. Therefore, other than the current provisions for children of key workers and vulnerable children, there will be no overall reopening of schools during the remainder of this academic year. Working alongside other departments, we will explore what role the voluntary, community and private sectors can play in making provision for our young people during the summer. Then, subject to medical guidance and safety, it would be my aim to see a phased reopening of schools, beginning with a limited provision for key cohort years in late August, followed by phased provision for all students at the beginning of September. This will not be a return to school as it was prior to COVID-19, but rather a new normal, reflective of social distancing and a medically safe regime. For all pupils, it will involve a schedule with a mixture of school attendance and remote learning at home. Finally, in line with the Executive strategy, contingent upon medical guidance and scientific evidence around susceptibility and transmission, consideration may be given to a full return for cohorts of younger pupils. This is the biggest public health crisis we've faced in living memory, and the Executive's priority is to help keep people safe and to support those who have faced real hardship.
Good afternoon, Minister. Tracy McGee, UTV. The Executive met today and decided not to relax any measures in their roadmap out of lockdown. Can you explain the rationale behind that?
Well, Tracy, the Executive is meeting currently twice a week. It will not be the case that every Executive meeting there is a decision taken to relax, and I think it's wrong that people will have a level of expectation. What we will do is we will look at the evidence, and when the time is right on specific measures to take those steps, and all issues will be under consideration.
Peter, good afternoon. Sticking with Tracy's point, why were indoor meetings with family members included in step one when the consensus is it's too risky and nowhere else in the UK is doing it? Aren't you raising false hopes? And just on the schools story, when you say key cohorts will return to school in August, which year groups are you talking about and how early might they go back?
Well, very good, Gareth. You've been able to ask 3 questions in one there. In terms of the issue of the wider picture in terms of indoor, we've already indicated there's a roadmap on a range of subjects in terms of easing lockdown. But what we've also said is that it's not simply a question of everything moving to stage 1, everything moving to stage 2. And so consequently, within particular actions that can take place, they will take place at different speeds. I think we're acutely aware of both balancing out what will be public safety, but also I think the real desire for families to reunite where possible in a safe and controlled manner. So that is something I think which is under consideration by the Executive. In terms of key cohorts, those are likely to be the cohorts which deal with entry to major public examinations and also the transition year from primary to post-primary. That has been a consistent approach which has been taken in other jurisdictions to give a level of prioritisation. I think the aim would be that would kick in subject to the medical guidance and public safety and all other measures being put in place in the second half of August, with a wider return to schools hopefully then at the beginning in September. And I think that will allow a particular level of phasing to take place. And again, similar actions are being taken in other places.
Peter, it's Michael McHugh from PA. I just wanted to ask, following up on Gareth's question, do you have any specific ideas about extra social distancing measures that will need to be introduced to enable schools to open in a limited fashion in August?
As part of that, I think we'll be exploring all the options. Part of the commitment today is to actually use the time that we have available to have very active engagement, to try to build as much of a consensus as possible as to how we do things. Now, from that point of view, social distancing will have a certain educational role, but particularly a medical role. So we want to actually take that in line with the advice that is there from the medical experts and how that is applicable to schools. It is important that there's a wide range of detail on the whole range of subjects which will need to be finalised, scoped out. There'll be that level of engagement, preparation and implementation. So it's too early to say precisely how particular measures will work out, but we want to bring people along with us and talk to the experts both within schools and indeed in terms of particularly the wider medical community as we move ahead.
Good afternoon, Minister. Alan Preston from the Belfast Telegraph. I just have 2 very quick questions. Firstly, how confident are you that measures like lending iPads that you've mentioned will be enough to stop the current inequalities in education from getting worse? For example, with groups like working class Protestant boys. And my second question is, you said the return to school is likely to feature a mix of classroom and remote learning. Do you think this might be quite difficult as more parents are likely to be returning to work in the coming months?
Well, I suppose just taking the second point first in relation to that. Look, there will be major challenges that are out there, and it's about trying to balance out all these things. I think probably the key determinant in that will also be what is safe, what social distancing can be put in place, and therefore I don't want to mislead people that we will be positioned at the start simply to say everybody can be at school. And if everybody can't be at school on any particular day, then we need to actually create a mixed situation in which there's a mixture of that classroom experience and remote learning. We think that that will at least be easier for pupils than it is at present, and also be helpful towards parents. That's got to be done in the best possible way, covering all angles. In terms of the devices, I think there's a range of mitigating measures that will want to be put in place to try to ensure that whatever disadvantages there, the gaps are closed. Is there still likely to be some level of inequality within our society? Yes, I think that is likely, and so therefore, in and of itself, this will not solve it. It'll be part of a wider package of measures. But in an imperfect situation, I think all we can try and do is to ensure that we have as much mitigation as possible to give as much opportunities for every child as possible.
Good afternoon, Minister. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear loud and clear, Amanda.
That's great. Thank you very much, Minister. I have two questions for you, one around your brief and then the second around an executive issue. The first is, what is the Education Department planning to do around primary school counselling services? And the second one is around the issue of women in Northern Ireland being treated like second-class citizens in the UK and Ireland. It's around the issue of the limited interim abortion services in Northern Ireland at present. So far, the Department of Health has failed to commission services, and Stormont also has a responsibility to issue information to the public, and it's also failing on that. Now, despite having responsibility and power in this area, the Health Minister has avoided answering reasonable questions on this matter so far and has deemed it necessary to push it on to the Executive. So as you're as an Executive Minister, I'll ask you the following. What is the Northern Ireland Executive's timeline for abortion services beyond the interim measures that are currently in place? How will that be funded, and how will that information be provided to the public?
Well, look, I suppose taking the second question first, I think that really the detail on a range of those questions will ultimately have to be answered by the Health Minister. I think, look, you know, there will be a range of views, particularly on the situation as regards abortion, by different executive ministers. Certainly, myself and my party would come from a particular position that would not be one that would be universally shared. But I think in terms of the detail about what information will be provided, it is obviously a responsibility for the Department of Health. I think they will have to come forward with the detailed answers. In relation to, you mentioned about counselling, it is important to realise that there has been existing, the Education Authority, in terms of a range of provisions that we put in place, particularly for vulnerable children, has continued. Indeed, counselling services have continued, albeit under a level of restrictions. It is also the case that in terms of the challenges that will be there on mental health, I think there is no doubt that everybody is aware that across society, but particularly for children, that will be a major challenge as we move ahead. I have ensured that in the budget as we move ahead, there is some additional money and support will be there for mental health, but it's got to be tackled, I think, on a cross-departmental and also, I suppose, a sort of a cross-sectional basis on that regard. And I think we'll only be in a position to fully assess what needs to happen and what can be provided whenever we come to a position where there's a greater level of recovery within society. Okay. Thank you. Okay.